Yeah, I'm a very demanding user, so a lot of things that I use I'm unhappy with. But the great thing about open source is if you're unhappy with something, you can make it better. And I didn't really know how to code a ton, but I just started hacking around, and I learned more and more as I went. And as I became a better and better programmer, I was able to do more with the software. And eventually to the point where I was writing large parts of it. The web is a very incremental instrument, meaning that things happen, very small changes over and over and over. In fact, on WordPress.com, we deploy new code about 100 times a day, if you can believe it. So literally, it's changing small way, lots and lots. But what happens is that you'll look away for a few months and you'll come back and it looks totally different. Or if you look away for a few years, like, oh my goodness. So over time, these small changes, incremental changes, add up to things that are quite significant. And usually at some point, they become meaningful enough that it might make a dent in the universe. It might change the way the web works a little bit. I think often it is not identifiable. We can try to, just you write history. I mean, you try to pick a point when something happened. There's certainly points like that for WordPress where we can say something happened. But when you really break it down, if that thing hadn't happened, all that matters is change. As long as you keep changing, you keep evolving, that's what matters. And that's why products die, is they just stop because they've been successful, because the founder was on a magazine. You know, they think, I know, and they stop changing, they stop innovating.
By the way, how long do you think will Facebook still be around?
Well, Facebook, there's an exit velocity. So you can be successful enough, particularly financially, that you're not going to go away tomorrow. But let's not remember, I mean, Kodak used to be one of the most innovative companies in the world. Some of these people who were really at the forefront of digital photography or computing, Atari.
MySpace used to be the world's largest social network.
It's happening quicker, right? So these cycles, I think, are getting faster and faster. The nice thing about having a successful business like Microsoft is that you can survive a couple of the downturns and still come back. I'm actually really excited about Windows 8. You could say that largely they've missed the past 5 years of innovation around mobile, but they're coming back with a really exciting and innovative product that I think is different from Android. Besides WordPress?
Besides WordPress, yeah.
That's a good question. I'm a huge fan of Simple Note, actually. It's a text, it's notes, but it synchronizes, and they have a web client. I use Notational Velocity to interact with it on my Mac, and then of course on iPhone and iPad. And there's something very beautiful in its simplicity. As I've grown older, I come to appreciate simple products more than complex ones, because it's actually very easy to make a complex product. And it takes a lot of great technology and artistry to create something which appears simple on the surface. When you think what is the simplest interface on the entire internet, it's Google search box. But how many thousands of PhDs and millions of servers are behind that one little box and just kick into action the moment you start typing? That's probably the best example I know of. The growth of Automatic has been really, really exciting, especially to me personally. I recently was chatting with Oren Jacobs, and we were talking about our companies. He has a new company called Toy Talk, but he was the CTO of Pixar for 15 years. And he said, Automatic's now 130 people. And he said, that's perfect. Pixar was 130 people when they made Toy Story. And the great thing about 130, or right around there, is that you have enough people that you can really tackle a big problem and do it well. And that's been what's most, but still small enough that you can be agile. So, I mean, lately, especially the past 6 months, we've been tackling WordPress as an application platform. We've been tackling social blogging.
What is social blogging?
We'll come back to that. And we've been tackling these mobile platforms. And these are really hard things, but the team is doing an amazing job. You know, the company works 24 hours because we're all over the world. And so sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and see what happened the night before. I'm like, that's amazing. If I wasn't careful, I would never sleep. So social blogging is the idea that you can have your home on the web, your hub, the first place that will always be yours. But you can still have it connected so that when you publish, all your friends see it. And not just all your friends on one network, like if you publish on Facebook or Twitter, but all your friends across all the networks. So, I mean, that's the thing. There are people on Twitter that will never use Facebook and vice versa. And some of these, just like MySpace, will not be around in 5 years. So as these trends change, as communication evolves, I think it's important to embrace it all. And WordPress, as open source and also as independent, means that we can. Google Plus is never going to integrate with Facebook because they hate each other. But WordPress can integrate with both because we're the Switzerland, if you will, of the social web. Well, sure. It's been too hard in the past.
Yeah.
And in Jetpack, we're trying to make it a lot easier. So future versions of Jetpack are going to try to address that. But two, we've also been working on things, social actions that are native to blogs. So for example, WordPress.com, you can now like things. Your first reaction is like, who cares? Like everyone has a way to like things. But what we found is that people really love it. Because if I like your blog post, you'll get an email that has my gravatar on it and my name and maybe shows my last 5 blog posts in the email so you can check me out. And it creates this beautiful loop of people following each other's blogs that has been very, very compelling. And it's nicer than just stats. You might see that you got 1,000 visitors today. Who are they? Who cares? It's actually more exciting than getting 1,000 visitors to get 5 likes because you see their faces and it might be people you know. And so as we've been introducing these on WordPress.com, we've seen huge upticks in engagement. So if you think about it, the growth of WordPress the past decade has been in almost a complete absence of social features. As we start to introduce them, I am very excited about the potential for growth in the future. I still hear people say that though, and our competitors say it. People will say, oh, WordPress is great if you want just a blog. I think it's difficult because in the internet, and WordPress has been evolving so rapidly, people who might have heard about it a long time ago still have the idea of what we were when we were younger. But it's the same as you meet someone when they're 10 years old, and then you think they're the same when they're 15 or the same when they're 20. Because the software has changed so quickly, sometimes it takes a little while for the world to catch up, but I don't mind. The people who matter know. I think you have to be really passionate about your idea because actually doing a startup is not glamorous. It's a lot of long nights, it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of worrying about whether you're going to be around in a few months. It's a lot of dealing with people who don't work out. I mean, it's everything that's bad about a business compressed into a very intense, and it becomes your entire life. People don't talk about that as much. When we're on stage, we talk about the glamorous sides, or we look to people who've made it. Almost by definition, you don't see the 9,999 other folks who weren't on stage, who were trying the same thing that I was. So I think that's important to recognize, that startups are very, very difficult and hard. So you must love it. So my philosophy has always been that even if it's not a successful business or a successful startup, I will have enjoyed my time along the way. And I think that's a good way to approach it for anyone, even whether they're passionate about the idea or not. Have the journey in a way that you're happy with what you create and you're proud of what you did, regardless of whether it works out. But I do think you said we didn't think about the business. Actually, from the very beginning, I always thought about the business.
You did?
Yes, because it's very important to be sustainable. We see so many examples of things that are fantastic, and then it stops in a year or two because they can't feed themselves or their families, Yeah. It's very important to have a business model. But if you think about it beforehand, I think where businesses go wrong is where they don't think about it beforehand. Because they get really, really big. Twitter, Tumblr are both examples of this. They're like, we'll figure it out later. Then they get really, really huge. And they're forced into a business that might not have been their first choice if they had designed it from the beginning, usually advertising. Because we were thinking about our business model from the beginning. We've been growing and actually very, very successful on this subscription model, where our customer is our users, not advertisers. And so that means that we're very aligned with our users. It's actually like Apple, like any of these others, like you make something great and people buy it. If you don't make something great, people don't buy it.
Yeah, just you sell your product at a very fair price.
Yeah, and so I think it's very important to think about the sustainability of it from the beginning. Actually, one of my favorite quotes there comes from Walt Disney. And he says, "We don't make movies to make money. We make money to make more movies." If I didn't have a dime in the world, I'd still work on this software. But when we're successful, that means I can hire more people. I can bring more folks in. I can invest more money into the WordPress ecosystem. And those tens of millions of dollars that have been invested have made the software infinitely better than if there weren't. I've done a couple investments around food. Foodsy was an artisanal, like an Etsy for food. I'm invested in a whiskey company in New York. I like whiskey. A lot of this is that traditional businesses, coffee, Blue Bottle Coffee, which is the one you're referring to, it's something that people have been doing for literally thousands of years. I visited Ethiopia. I actually had my first cup of coffee this year in Ethiopia. They've been doing it there for longer than even this building has been around. So it's something very old, but the potential for their influence changes with the internet and with mobile and with technology. So Blue Bottle, which has this very old-fashioned, slow way of making coffee with beans that are only less than a day old or less than 36 hours old, it creates a really amazing product. Before, 100 years ago, it just would have been that amazing coffee shop that someone might have heard of. And maybe you'd even travel to get to it, but it was really only for the people in that neighborhood. Now they can scale it. And I love the idea of this much, much higher quality product, this Blue Bottle coffee, being available to potentially the whole world. They can take their approach and scale it out that I don't think could have happened before. And so that's why, that's the potential of the business. But fundamentally, I love entrepreneurs who are passionate about something, even if it's something I don't personally care about, like quilting Elvis pictures or something, right? If I met an entrepreneur who was like so into that they inspired me to be excited about Elvis quilts.
Don't say you're not excited about Elvis quilts.
I would invest in that because I think that sort of enthusiasm and that excitement can be contagious and can change the world. I would say my photos are very autobiographical. I will sometimes post galleries of a day that might have 100 photos in them. And especially when I'm someplace I'm not normally, like here, I get very fascinated by everything, by like the little flourishes on the corner of a statue, or like even the smallest things I think can be very telling of a place. So what I try to do in my photography is I try to capture a feeling of the place. So if you scroll through those 100 photos, it was like you were there and were hanging around with me all day. And then when I look back at those photos years from now, it'll be like I'm reliving that day. So it's very much, of course I do set up shots and I look for things and I'm always trying to practice good photography. But more than anything, I'm just trying to catch the essence of a place. I would probably Nikola Tesla. I find Tesla very inspiring.
Have you been following Oatmeal's?
Of course, I'm a donor.
Me too.
I'm a donor to the Tesla Museum. Hopefully it gets off the ground. Inventors throughout history. I'd love to talk to Lincoln or Churchill, some of these great leaders, especially in difficult times, because I think that really, you learn a lot about humanity in those. There's a few musicians. So for example, John Coltrane, Dexter Gordon. I would have loved to have met them when they were alive. And then in business, even today, some of the people who I have met, I find like Jeff Bezos incredibly inspiring. Amazon is actually probably the company I admire most in modern technology. And it's pretty cool. Like we live in a time that I think we'll look back 100 years from now and say that there was something special going on there. That the rate of change was accelerating, that society was changing, that technology was being adopted at a rate it hadn't before, and it's still getting faster. And so I feel like, especially over the next 20 or 30 years, something's really going to change. Like at the point that we're iterating so quickly on fundamental things, some phase shift, a singularity, if you will happen.